So one thing that I noticed with APJ was, he was never happy in terms of, during a conversation, because, somewhere I believe being quickly happy is in a way, not being true to yourself. There is not a lot of innovation, to be honest. A lot of our startups are mostly rip-offs of American startups. For example, every Yelp has a Zomato, right? Every Airbnb has a Know Your Room. Every Amazon has a Flipkart.
Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of SimMeet. My name is Mihir Kulkarni and I will be your host for this session. Today, we have an extremely prestigious individual as our guest. He's an international diplomat, a Harvard graduate technology entrepreneur with an expansive career stretching from product management at Apple to heading his own startup, Spacify. He's a six-time TEDx speaker with over 500 national news interviews and is increasingly famous among the engineering youth of India. It is my absolute honor and privilege, sir, to welcome Siddharth Rajans to SimMeet. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mihir. And thank you so much, VIIT, for inviting me for this interview. I'm glad I could make it. Perfect.
So I want to start with like a question about your TED Talks. Like you have had many TED Talks before, and it is a question that is related with something that you had spoken in your TED Talk. So in a previous TED Talk, you had talked about how we as Indians don't give enough credit to our own knowledge competency. Whether it be highlighting the different pioneers Bharat has produced in different fields, or even the innate cultural approximation we have towards knowledge and knowledge systems. Neither does the West really acknowledge this, like our achievement. So what do you think we need to do to change that?
See, that's absolutely true. So I always feel, and I always say that we shouldn't give up on India. So that's something that I have often said, that there is absolutely no political bias involved in this statement or anything. It's simply patriotic, and it's simply about trying to solve for our national issues or national problems using the engineering and management prowess that our country is producing. So when we talk of brain drain, even I would say brain drain is not bad if you go abroad, if you work for an esteemed organization, if you study at a great university, it's all brilliant. But then at the end of the day, you should come back and reflect upon the problems that our country is facing, and you should go and try to solve them from the root cause. So if you are using brain drain in a really positive way, then even that is great. So that's what I feel always. This Western media outlook, this Western media perception of India has to change, because the way they have the thing here is we need to change the narrative. We need to create our own narrative about India. So the Western ideology or the narrative is always they look upon India as a third world nation, and that's totally not true, because we so there is a thing that I always have felt, and I haven't really spoken of until now. So I'd actually be saying this, that because I've studied at a lot of universities, say some in Singapore, some in US. I've actually experienced education there, and especially at Harvard. See, all of these places are definitely great. They are a class apart. But then the kind of academic rigor that our institutes have, our 4-year UGC engineering syllabus has, or the kind of pedagogy and academic syllabus that our IITs and IIMs deliver, it is much more academically rigorous than the kind of syllabus or syllabi these people follow, because it's the education system in the West is more philosophical and literary. It is less about solving actual issues, solving numericals, actually developing the cutting edge specialization that is required today to be able to solve problems. So that's what I feel. I mean, our education systems are brilliant. Our achievements on the international level, especially on the academic front, are a class apart. But somehow the Western media doesn't come around to highlighting that. If you talk about the Olympics, or you talk about games like that, there'll always be like negative articles why India is not performing well there. The problem isn't that we aren't performing well. We have a different niche specialization. We have an entire different core competency where we are doing great, where no one else is even remotely close to us. We talk of things like the national spell bee that happens in the US, right? Every year there has been an Indian kid who has been winning the national spell bee for the longest time in its history. But then again, we as Indians need to realize that, and we need to portray that. So the problem is that in India, somewhere I feel our the way we project, the way we market ourselves, that is something where we fall short of excellence in terms of what the US or other European countries they do. They market the hell out of everything. So it is time we Indians realize that whatever we are doing, whatever our institutions are doing, it's at a world class level. It's in fact crossing world class boundaries at a lot of time. Like even during the COVID crisis, despite the fact that we had such a massive second wave in India, and there was so much of crisis and everything, India is one of the only countries in the world that has produced 2 vaccines. So it is something commendable. Every time there is a scientific achievement being talked about in the world, India is at the forefront. So we need to recognize that, we need to change that narrative, and we need to build this dream of a new India, wherein we of India. Couple questions like every time it rains, the electricity goes out in some Indian city or some Indian town. So what is the point of producing like 1 million engineers every year if we cannot solve for this single problem statement, right? So we need to try and solve problems around these simple areas. We need to apply our academic acumen into solving for that.
We are engineering students, and many among us, like sometime in the future, might develop our own startups. And what is the difference that you have noticed in the startup environment in the West and in India? And what are the changes that you think are necessary in the Indian startup world so that more emerge and become successful?
Yeah, that's a good question here. See, there are a lot of that's an area that we actually need to talk about on an everyday basis. We need to really brainstorm a lot of areas that have that the West has done really well. Number one thing that the US system has in a way been beneficial for them is because of the rather laid back and rather relaxed way of working. They have been able to put more emphasis on innovation, on coming up with first principle technologies, rather than trying to simply build something just for the heck of it and in order to live a livelihood. So if you talk of Apple, there was a phase in Steve Jobs' life when he actually became a hippie, and he traveled across to India, to other places where he met sadhus and met mystics, and he delved deep into the concept of what is it that human beings want. He delved deep into the human psyche, and that is the learning that he took back and started building things and products around his renewed understanding of the human mind. So I believe we somewhere need to bring that sense of innovation in the way things are done in India, because if you talk of the Indian startup ecosystem, there is not a lot of innovation, to be honest. A lot of our startups are mostly rip-offs of American startups. For example, every Yelp has a Zomato, right? Every Airbnb has an Oyo Room. Every Amazon has a Flipkart. So every startup is somewhere a rip-off of a previously successful American startup. So we need to break this rip-off model, and we need to come up with original innovation, things that have not yet been done before. So for that, we need to build an entire nation of problem solvers, rather than people trying to make a livelihood and trying to make profits out of their business model as soon as they can.
So like there are technologies like AR, VR, ML, AI, and many like buzzwords like big data, etc. And they are said to be our future. And there is no doubt about that. As students, we are encouraged to enter these fields. But you are a policy maker, and you are like, let's say you're a policy expert, even at the UN and such. So do you think as a society or as a people, we are becoming too myopic towards our obsession with the technical fields, and maybe we need to start taking, as a people, we need to start taking more taking up different fields as well, other than the technical fields?
Absolutely. I mean, that's, again, you have nailed it, because we are a society of engineers in India. So we need to, break that obsession with trying to do things around engineering. Again, in engineering, we are obsessed with computer science or IT. So again, this obsession with certain fields and certain branches need to change, because then obviously, these are they provide stable career options, but then it's not any of the core engineering fields or electives also absolutely do the same. So I think it's time we thought of our career choices, and as a society in India also, we think of the kind of opportunities that lie in a much more broader framework. Again, in policy, we do not have a lot of people who are experts in public policy or have a specialized niche in the policy area. And again, policy as a subject, it's at the intersection of technology and management. So today, our management pass outs, our engineering pass outs, need to holistically imagine the future for the next 5 or 10 years, not just look at a temporary job wherein they just want an entry into a company and thereafter start drawing a salary. Because once you start drawing a salary, believe me, 99% of people, they become complacent. The word is complacent. I mean, they just forget that they need to take risks or need to reimagine, redevelop themselves. There is absolutely no growth that happens once a person is comfortable. So the fundamental problem is we should stop being comfortable with where we are. We need to break free from that, and in that process we need to apply our knowledge into newer areas. Like for instance, if we are an engineering student and doing an MBA, I think that is fine. Often a lot of people joke around the fact that you are an engineer, you did an MBA. It's fine. In fact, you might notice that the IIT IIM combination is still a huge thing, and it's still even the companies, they always look for a candidate with that kind of a biodata. And in fact, the engineering background, it provides a base for your analytical skill set. So as a management graduate, you are someone with a proven analytical skill set. So often, I have seen a lot of speakers, for the fun of it, they often try and make fun of these things, that an engineering and an MBA, what sort of a combination is that? But that is fine, as long as we are able to make a new career shift in a certain direction, such as an analytics profession. Today analytics is at the forefront of everything. Like they say, data is the new oil, and data analytics, big data, all the programs that make the backbone of the analytics industry, R programming, SAS, SPSS, Hadoop, all of these are essentially engineering related programming languages, right? You can't expect an art student or a science student or a commerce student to really pick these up. So we, as a country that is obsessed with technical skill sets, we also need to assess what are these new areas that have much more broader application, so that our engineering and management students, who are like the major pass outs of the country, can collaborate with a lot of interdisciplinary areas across arts, across sciences. Like at companies like Google, companies like Apple, they often recruit people from a very diverse background, people with degrees in majors in sociology, psychology, in areas such as anthropology that were lesser heard of. Even those people end up making their career at Google, because an anthropologist is required to help the engineers evaluate what is known as design thinking. How do people think, and what are their expectations? What are the trends of innovation? This is ideally the work of a social anthropologist, to be able to determine trends and patterns forming around innovation and in the society. So we need to be able to build a future where we have a multi-domain, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and cross-functional experience. So this cross-functional experience is the future. We cannot rely on a single skill set to take us further. And in fact, whenever you look at leaders in their respective fields, like if you look at a Bill Gates, if you look at a Sundar Pichai, you will always notice that they have this cross-functional knowledge. They can talk about a lot of things. They are not just stuck at the single software vertical that they are working on. So that's what makes the leader someone who can understand a lot of teams and their requirements.
So I have two questions, but I think I can merge them into one. So let's talk about
Yeah.
your sustainable development goals
All right.
at the United Nations, so that program. And
Yeah.
also let's talk about your startup,
Yeah.
Spacify. I'm not sure if these might go
Yeah.
together or not, but let me at least
Yeah.
attempt to question you them about them together. So could you talk to us about that?
Perfect. Yeah. So first I'll talk about the idea behind Specify, how that happened. So while in 2013 when I was with Google and I noticed that they were working on a project called as Project Loon or the Balloon Project, where the idea was to beam down Wi-Fi signals using hot air balloons. However, science fiction or sci-fi that might sound like, the idea was good for remote areas because in today's times we cannot really depend upon trying to solve for the digital divide by laying down cables and wires. I mean, wired communication has reached a complete saturation. Now we cannot aim at trying to solve the digital divide. I mean, a country like India, three-fourths of the country is still not connected to the internet. There are tons and tons of villages, rural areas in India that do not still have uninterrupted Wi-Fi or internet access. And internet has the potential to change people's lives. So we need to make sure that it's a basic human right today, and we need to make sure people have it. And therefore, wireless communication was the solution towards it. So that's when we figured that we need to bring about a new generation of technology to this entire framework. So how we went about that ideology was, see, the first technology that came in this domain was intranet, which was the communication our parents used to communicate to the next cubicle in an office. Then came internet, which is the interconnected network of deep sea cables. So the entire technology that propels the internet are the deep sea cable network that spread across the globe. But then again, as so many wires, if we lay down so many wires, that's not going to solve for the last mile connectivity concept. So in order to reach the last mile, we need to upgrade that technology. And today, when we have so much of wireless communication, why not bring internet onto a wireless platform? So that's how this concept of outernet slash satellite powered internet was born. Outernet is a new generation. It's the third generation in the interconnectivity solution after intranet and internet. So we are aiming to solve the digital divide by creating an equivalent of the deep sea cable network in what is known as the low Earth orbit. Low Earth orbit is the orbit right after the atmosphere. So we aim to fill that with CubeSats, nanosats, and microsats that can beam down Wi-Fi signals and connect a large part of the rural landscape in countries such as India and across the world. And that is the future of our telecommunications initiative, the future of telecommunications for mankind. So that is something that we targeted. A lot of our work was motivated, was patronized by Dr. Kalam. So Dr. Kalam was one of our first, guides. And as we could say, as a startup, it was really difficult for us to find a bandwidth like India's primary telecommunications satellites, INSAT 4A and INSAT 3C. We had no bandwidth with any of these satellites. And then it was Dr. Kalam's intervention because of his background with ISRO and his otherwise good connections with the government as the former president. He connected us to the Sanchar Bhavan. Sanchar Bhavan mein tab the then telecom minister was Manoj Sinha ji, who is now the Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir. So we met him. We had our first CubeSat launch that happened as part of ISRO's 104 satellite wala launch. ISRO, as we know, is one of the most jugaadu space organizations in the world. They have had this expertise of launching 100 satellites in a single PSLV launch. So as part of all these ambitious ideas, we went ahead and did that, and we are proud partners. We are one of the first partners of Digital India. We have been working on this technology. Our aim and ambition is to make this a reality for every human being. There are mega projects. We are part of them. It's called OneWeb. That the aim is that instead of a single satellite, we really can't scale things up. So OneWeb aims to launch. OneWeb has been powered by Airbus as well as Richard Branson is one of the investors. The idea is to fill up the low Earth orbit with microsats, nanosats, and CubeSats by 2030. They aim to launch 6,000 satellites we'll be partnering with them, and that's how we are creating the deep sea cable equivalent. Just like for internet, we needed deep sea cables, and that's how internet comes and connects the world. Similarly, for outernet, we are creating the low Earth orbit satellite network that can connect and upgrade the entire telecommunications process. So the idea was that I saw a simple divide. Whenever I say there is a divide or a gap, we are talking about that X. The X in SpaceX stands for that. The X in TEDx stands for that. We are looking at trying to solve for the impossible. The X in the equation is that there was this clear divide, clear gap that despite laying down wires and despite all these huge projects by the government, we were unable to solve for last mile connectivity. We really couldn't reach every village by laying down wires. We need to bring that entire game on the wireless platform, and that's where this idea was born. So it was an idea where we tried to solve for a simple problem by bringing in a breakthrough technology. This was one of the concepts that Google had proposed when they came up with this concept called moonshot innovation. They said if we have a huge problem, we need to bring about a breakthrough technology and a rapid means to solve it. If the problem is huge, we cannot aim to get a government policy that aims to solve it in the next 15 years. We need to scale it up real time. That's what entrepreneurs do. We work around scalability. We need to go from 0 to 1 in a year's time, and that's something that I totally believe in and totally work towards. So that's how this concept of my startup happened, and since then we have been able to do a lot of work around aspirational districts and digital India and so on. Now coming back to my professional life, I realized that at a certain time, once you have done the startup and you have co-founders, you yourself also need to grow professionally, because we weren't a startup where we had a very huge market. We are essentially in the B2B segment. So professionally, I also needed to grow. That's when I ended up. So I never left my job, because I was constantly working for Apple before my education at Harvard happened. I was a product manager there. So that entire thing kept me very abreast with the latest happenings of the industry. After which I went ahead for further higher education. After my higher education, I ended up working for the UN. So that's how the entire thing happened. It's like anything that any Indian kid does. Just that I always believe that on the sidelines, I need to commit myself to a startup idea that needs to solve for a very important problem rather than trying to make money. So whenever so the problem is that in the Indian startup ecosystem, I always say that we need to have a simple thought in our mind that PR come or काम ज़्यादा. We need to reduce our PR. We need to reduce that form of outreach. Outreach किसे कहते हैं? Impact किसे कहते हैं? When people know of you, people speak of you, or how much of your problem is solved. So a lot of our startups in the Indian startup ecosystem often are advertised that they have raised so many $1 million. So much of funding was raised from so and so ventures. There were so many venture capitalists, Sequoia and everyone involved. Now, where were these people who raised millions and millions of dollars during the COVID crisis? क्या हम एक simple app नहीं बना सकते थे to solve for the problems that India faced? So that is where we need to reassess what is our definition of impact. Impact, हम कितने लोग हमारे बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, क्या वो impact है, या impact ये है कि हमने कितने प्रतिशत हमारे प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व कर दिया. So we need to reassess that definition of our impact. We are the second type. We are less on PR. We focus more on trying to solve for our problem statement. So that's what we have been doing. On the sustainable development goals front, that's something that I have always been intrigued by. It's been 3 years now I've been working on that. It's something that I have always wanted to do because of the very nature of the problems that they address. There are 17 SDGs, as you might know. I believe each one of these are trust areas, not just for an organization like the UNDP, but for the entire mankind. We need to solve for these problems real time. There are a lot of solutions. It's a very solution-based approach that we are trying to bring in. As a policy professional, I'm trying to address the policy loopholes that exist in the system, wherein we can, get quicker funding, we can get quicker implementation, and my focus is on execution. So we are creating solutions with my tech expertise, with my management acumen. I'm trying to manage and build things around that in a framework where we are working at the intersection. We are trying to build programs and projects with analytics as a key feature. So I believe I have, in a small way, not really invented, but somewhere diversified this area known as policy analytics. Policy needs to have an analytics background to itself. Simply making rules, implementing them, and giving it to organizations won't work. We need to assess them real time. Every single penny that is spent off from an organization needs to be accounted for. So policy analytics and diversifying the impact of SDGs, that's what I am overlooking, and that's what I'm completely focused into. So the idea is to bring about, like, youthful energy to old bureaucratic governmental processes, because governmental processes run through a very structured rules, regulations, paperwork wala format. I am trying to change that with my technical expertise. So why this happened? Like, why did I shift from core technology such as Apple to a policy role here? And then the reason is because while working at my startup, I collaborated with Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who's the Chief Minister of MP. We collaborated with Sanchar Bhavan in Delhi, which is the headquarters for India's telecommunications entire ministry. We worked with Manoj Sinha. Everywhere I saw there was a bureaucratic loophole. There was a bureaucratic shortcoming that was not being addressed properly. So so what happens is ministers are only faces. They don't really have the ability to understand technical problems and solve them in real time. The IAS cadre knows that, but they are, mostly people who have come through UPSC, who don't have the technical skill set required to solve the problem, right? Not a lot of them are engineers. OSDs at a lot of mantralayas are not engineers or not specialists in that domain. There is this huge divide. That is why the pace in which we solve for problems in the policy process or in the bureaucratic process is slow. So I realized that there is a huge requirement of people like us, people like me, people like all of us, who come from engineering and management backgrounds, who can actually change things in real time. So it was a very calculated decision. It was something that I'm passionate about, and it has more problem solving potential, more impact in terms of solving real problem versus how many people speak of us. So it was an extension of the kind of, when you are young and you are in a startup domain and you are, you interact with government, you feel like, yaar, ye kya kar rahe hain, yaar? It is the same situation I was in. There is, on a funny note, if you notice, Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai, when they are being, questioned by the US Senate, if you notice, the senators had no clue about data analytics, about ad monetization, about anything that Google and Facebook were up to. They were asking them silly questions like, if I get up from here and move there, will Google know about it? Like, Sundar had no idea how to answer a question like that. So I was in a similar situation, and that is when I realized it is time I have the age and the skill set required to make the transition, to be on that side and address this, rather than being an outsider and simply trying to answer their lame questions. So it's time that we rise up to that level.
Right. So you talked about APJ Abdul Kalam before, and you cannot undermine what an absolute Indian hero APJ Abdul Kalam is. So let's commemorate his memory.
Totally.
And any experience that you have with him, could you just share anything that you remember?
Yes. So my last meeting was with him, was on the 4th of May 2015 at his residence, Jan Rajaji Marg, which is the former president's residence in Delhi now. So, and then later that year, so we were to meet in July or August to develop what progress we had done with reference to the satellite that we were designing. And in July that year, he passed away on 27th July, while delivering lecture at IIM in Shillong, I believe. So in that entire process, what I understood and learned is that, even during our last meeting, his focus was not on, on any of the material achievements of that we had done, or how, because as a youngster back then, I was trying to show him that, this I had an entire with me. And even, if you have noticed that photo of mine with APJ, there is a paper that's there on the desk. That was our white paper that we had published for the entire satellite framework that we were planning. He was interested in that. He was interested in the technology, and in fact, ensuring that the satellite actually delivers, rather than looking at our, our overall coverage, our awards that we had received, or citations and research publications that we had received. So he was less interested in the academic achievements, or in the academic otherwise PR achievements that we had done. He was more interested in the technical aspect of how much we have accomplished in the real sense of it. So that is something I always believe that shaped my view of what he actually wanted Indians to do. He was passionate about India, number one, and that is something that we cannot ever change about how we must, as Indians, essentially as Indians, we must be. In fact, there are a lot of things, like, if I remember mentioning that so and so university in Singapore called me for a lecture, and I spoke about that. He never showed a sign of extreme joy or happiness whenever you spoke of a foreign university. That is the level of patriotism he had. That he never found joy in the fact that, he, as an Indian kid, is he is admiring a foreign university. He is a patriot in the true sense of it. Like, how much emphasis we must lay down on our own colleges, on our own institutions, and on trying to solve our own problems. That was the mindset he had, and that's what I believe. And again, there was no, I would say, like, casual chats that we had. Our conversations were extremely specific. So that level of specificity that he had, in trying to address problems, in trying to know people, what is it that they want to do. So his focus was on trying to identify as much as social good we could do. And I believe these are some of those few instances, where I always remind myself that this is what we need to do as Indians, and this is what we need to do as a human being, right? So I believe, people like him cannot be replaced, and that's
Absolutely.
something that, yeah. And
Absolutely.
the idea is we must create more Kalams rather than, trying to do anything at all. Yeah.
Definitely. So we are coming towards the end. Like, there are no more questions that I have, but we have some rapid fire questions that you may want to address. So should we go along with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what is the next thing that you want to do? Like, what is the next thing on your bucket list? Like, is there any bucket list?
Yeah, I do. So I haven't done a PhD. That's something that's always, been crossing my mind. I was always an industry-oriented person. Though I was good academically, I did fine for myself, but then I was good at taking examinations. But then I never really, aspired to do a PhD, because I thought it was a very long process. And I always undermined the value of academic versus industry experience. I always thought real industry and job experience makes you more of a professional than getting a degree. And that to some extent is true. But then I do plan to, have a PhD somewhere down the line. So because I believe it's something I can do well, I can bridge the industry academia gap. I can provide some real industry insights in the form of a doctoral thesis rather than simply publishing more academic literature. So I want to change the way a PhD thesis is done, and that's something I am currently, looking into. I'm in talks, and let's see how that goes. Yeah.
Right. So, one can never overestimate the value of a good book or books. So, which are your favorite book, or do you have any one particular very, very valuable book that you?
Yeah, there are a lot of books that I am, I often read. I very, actively keep changing my current favorite book. So there's this one book that I'll really recommend the listeners of this particular podcast. That's 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. So that's one book that I really would recommend. That's my absolute favorite. Apart from 0 to 1, there is another great book, Industries of the Future by Alec Ross. That is another great book that I would recommend. And then almost anything that you can get your hands on. I am an avid reader of Indian history, especially with reference to the British rule of India. That is something that I believe no greater patriotic feeling can come from understanding how much India lost during the British rule. Like, Tharoor Shashi Tharoor, he quoted that at the start of the British rule in India during 1757, when the Battle of Plassey happened, India was probably like 23-25% of global GDP. And at the end of the British rule of 200 years in 1947, we had been reduced to a poster boy of the third world economy. So things like these are what that drive me. I believe this if we cannot drive inspiration, then I don't think there is anything that can invoke passion in us. So, in order to be able to reclaim India's position in the world, I believe I read a lot around those things. So any book, my favorite author is William Dalrymple. There is this book called The Anarchy. I really want all of you guys to read it. I mean, it will give you a lot of perspective of where we come from and what the pattern of industrialization is with reference to what has happened, in the past and what we must do to reclaim that.
So you talked about Tharoorji's like when he talked about like the GDP of India. I believe the figure he quoted was something like 700 trillion or 7 trillion.
Yeah.
No, I think it was 700 trillion dollars that not dollars, pounds that Britain owed to India as reparations or something like
India
that. Yeah.
And reparations. Yeah.
That's true. I believe I have read something about that. So again, let's talk about,
so that's the thing,
you can continue, sir.
Yeah, so that's the thing, what I was saying is that the industrialization of the West has happened at the expense of the deindustrialization of India, right? We were always a very advanced nation. It's just that by brute force and by using political weaponry, we were made to
absolutely
go through all that. Yeah.
So let's talk about movies, sir. Like, is there any one movie that you would particularly recommend to the listeners, maybe?
One movie, I think, in the age of Netflix and all of these things, a lot of great content that's coming. There's one advice I can give with reference to content for the listeners. It's that, don't be a black hole for content. Like, don't absorb every single content that's coming right on the OTT platform. Be selective in how you see things around yourself. But a lot of good movies here. I haven't been able to catch up on a lot of them really. But then I think I am a Marvel fan. So I think, if you watch anything on the Avengers franchise, I think MCU franchise, that's okay with me. So I've been following WandaVision and then Falcon and the Winter Soldier and all those things. So on the lighter side, any of these movies are great. Yeah, to obviously, learn more and all, there are always some great movies that you can always look up to. So, but I think movies should be for entertainment. There's always so much to learn from around the world. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 100% over there. So, you've obviously traveled a lot. You had your like graduation in Singapore, then even in USA. So, are there any other countries that you've traveled to, and are there any particularly really memorable things that happened to you in these different countries? Which is your favorite place to travel and something like that?
Yeah, so actually, what I really love about is the backpacking culture a lot of Europeans have. If you go abroad, I really love the fact that you should stay at a backpacker hostel because you meet so many people. Like even today, I have apart from the friends I met at Harvard or in Singapore, a lot of people whom I met at backpacker hostels who are there to just check out the place like I was. And today, the kind of people who go about as backpackers are just everyday people like you and me. They aren't really hippies or people who are who are into substance abuse or any of that. They are just everyday people who are staying on a budget. So I believe the backpacker experience has been great. So whenever I go to a new country, I'm a very desi person at heart. I Instead of always staying at a 5-star hotel or something, I prefer staying at a normal backpacker hostel. You get free breakfast, you have a bed to yourself. I think you meet new people, and those new people end up becoming like good friends over the years. And then when you visit their country, you can actually go and meet them. So that way, the world becomes a single family, and a stranger is probably just a person you haven't met. He's just a friend that you haven't met. So that concept, I really love that. So I've traveled across Europe again for work mostly. Most of my travel has been again for either keynotes or for work related travel. So I don't really have so all the tourism that I have done has been in those 2 to 3 day windows that I have visited the city. So it's been around Paris, or it's been around parts of Europe or South America, or Dominican Republic, or the US, Mexico, Canada, USA, and then parts of Singapore, down there in the oceanic region, and then again India, Japan, these places, Taiwan. So I really love comparing cities. Like I would really like to quote this for people because I've stayed in New York, so I know for a fact that Manhattan or New York City is not really all that glamorous as people think of it to be. Like, that's just Karan Johar movies for you guys, right? I mean, Karan Johar movies just make New York look so glamorous. The fact is, New York is a really old city. If you take the Manhattan, the New York subway, if you go to a station in Manhattan, the trains are really old, the tracks are dirty, and the biggest thing is, I have seen rats this big running on the New York subway tracks, and people find it really hard to believe. But that's the truth, right? I mean, Manhattan is just another overcrowded city with equal amounts of rich and poor, and people trying to make survival out of all odds. And and things aren't just as glamorous as Bollywood and movies try and show it. So I believe the human side of these cities is what that inspires me to be able to see how development has happened around the world. And then again, countries like these have marketed it really well. So USA में for instance California में एक गली है, it's called the Bubblegum Alley, जिसमें कि लोगों ने कुछ नहीं किया, chewing gum आके चिपका दिया है, and that has become one of the most Instagrammed places on earth. So in India we have so much. We have like huge fortresses created by rulers 600, 700 years ago, and we do not showcase them as much as USA showcase a lane with chewing gums from around the world. So I think we need to market our talent and our things better. Yeah.
Other than the West marketing itself, even India markets the West in some areas.
Yeah. Exactly. India markets. India is very happy in praising them. Everything that's there. Yeah?
Right. So I guess that is like we've come to the end of the interview. Like, people like you, even like I would easily compare you to APJ Abdul Kalam, in at least the sense that you are at least installing the kind of not only patriotism but the analytical and the technical thinking within the youth. And like through your keynotes, I'm sure many more people will be able to learn a lot about how like the entrepreneurial or even like the startup mindset can be inculcated into the Indian like economy or the Indian environment. And there is 100% a lot that can be learned from you, and this was an absolute pleasure for me to be able to interview you. So thank you, sir.